Now, how many people here, by applause, were watching the night that Barack Obama was elected the President of the United States? Now, we all know that Obama has a way with words, but for me, the most profound statement of that night came from the tears that welled in the eyes of Reverend Jesse Jackson. For his 5 decades as a civil rights leader, Jackson has marched with, worked with, and he's helped to blaze the trail from Dr. King to President Obama. Reverend Jackson has been not only a witness to history, but a man who has helped to shape it. And on the night of Obama's election, Reverend Jesse Jackson's tears sent a message that was heard around the world. The change is possible in one person's lifetime. He's one of America's top civil rights leaders, and he got started as a student. Elected class president in high school, Reverend Jesse Jackson became an activist in university fighting to desegregate a public library in his hometown of Greenville, South Carolina. 5 years later, he was marching and working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he was even with the civil rights legend the day that he was assassinated. But Jackson kept fighting the good fight. In the 1980s, he took on the role of leading spokesman and advocate for African American causes. He ran for the Democratic presidential nomination twice and got closer to the Oval Office than any other African American until Obama. In 2000, President Clinton awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the United States' highest civilian honor. Please welcome our shameless idealist, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. You know, in our generation, for teen mothers, there's a lot of support networks. But in 1940s, South Carolina, your mom was 16 years old and unwed when you were born. Were you aware as a young person growing up the challenges that she had to face?
I had no idea of it at that time because I was not isolated from segregation. I was insulated by my mother, my grandmother, and my pastor. And so I guess maybe the most traumatic part of it was at some point to learn that my stepfather was not my father. But the next one was they kept saying, you're going to school next year. Go ready to go to school. Across from our home about a mile was this nice red brick schoolhouse. It had merry-go-rounds. It had sliding boards and green grass. But over there when we went to church, about 3 miles on the other side of town, school without any grass in the yard, without the sliding boards and the like. So I just knew we were going to school that was close. And that day we stepped out the house, but had to go that way. Yeah. And I knew we were going to that other school. Yeah. And in that school, because it was overcrowded, they had 2 shifts, 8 to 12 and 12:15 to 4. But against those odds, so it was really about fighting odds to get an education. And it was my mother who took me to school, didn't send, and said to Mrs. Robinson, it may be difficult sometimes, but do what you must do. Use that strap if you must. They had a trusting relationship because Mrs. Robinson also taught Sunday school. They had that kind of parent-teacher trusting relationship. Then they took me to Mr. Drimes' office, said, if he really gets out of hand, do what you must do. I mean, mother was preparing me for this whipping.
All around.
All around. But it was in that situation that we learned to use what we had and not cry about what we didn't have. Because even when you're down, you can dream of being up. You can always dream beyond your predicament. So while the school was segregated, there was so much competition, academic competition, and athletic competition, and love. So we learned to live in that capsule until we grew out of it at some point in time.
Well, can I talk about that dreaming? Because you talked about how it's a difficult time being a young boy, an African-American boy in that time, you said in the past you've been teased by your friends because your father was out of the picture. So who taught you how to hold your head up high?
It may have been community expectations, because you learn to live in your environment. And that's a good thing, to adjust your environment. But you must also not accept the limitations of your environment. And so to go to school with 6 of us together with a book, in some instances go to another class where each of us had a book.
6 students sharing one book.
Sharing one book. We could not take the books home because the next shift had to use the books, or the books were 3 and 4 years old that whites had already used or marked them up. But that was standard. We did not know of a board of education. We did not know of a school superintendent. We were not involved in any protest of the sort. After all, this was 18 years before we had the right to vote. But within that context, we were taught, I suppose, 2 things. One, that strong minds break strong chains. The education really does matter. A developed mind really can set you apart. And a developed mind was a sense of dreams and a sense of morality can give you weapons to cope in that situation. Now, coping did not become at that time what it became by the time I was 18 and 19, but we learned to cope, A, quote unquote, stay out of trouble, B, do well in school, and do that, work real hard and make your parents proud.
Now, you're a hero to so many of the students who are here with us today. So when you were growing up as a kid, who were your heroes?
Well, one was my mom and dad. They were so inspirational to me. And my father, who adopted me, was an athlete, was a baseball player, who had just come out of World War II. I learned many of my values from him. I remember, I think the first image I saw in life, I must have been 3 or thereabout, was Mom in the bed showing me his picture in this platoon of soldiers. We were looking forward to his coming home from the war. And I remember this morning when there was a flag hanging on the front porch, and he's coming up the hill with the duffel bag on his back, embracing my mom and giving me some candy, putting me on his back. I remember that scene rather vividly. And then I jumped on his back and rode around. He was, my guy. And one day after he got his honorable discharge, we were cutting grass and raking leaves for these people. And the guy came down the steps dressed in a rather immaculate way and talking funny, different than other Southerners talked. This guy was a German, the guys that had been fighting the war, yet he was now in charge of him. He had 3 jobs, working with the same man. And what happened was that one Sunday, while my brother and I was with him cleaning the floor and emptying the cans and the like, the door opened at the bank, and this man came in and said, "Hey, Charlie, come here," in that tone. And so Daddy kept buffing. I just sensed something. Hey, Charlie, he was with 2 of his friends. "Come here," was very demanding. And then, "If you don't come here, I'm going to kick you." So Daddy just stopped. I didn't know what that meant. I knew he had this sense of anguish and temper about what had happened to him and other soldiers in the war. He walked up and said, "Now, my wife is ill. It's Christmas time, and my 2 boys are with me. You with your friends. I cannot stop you from kicking me, but you cannot take the leg back with which you do the kicking. So I tell you, take these keys." And he left those 3 jobs on principle. I guess my politics comes from that at a certain point that you have to do what's right if it's hurtful and sacrificial. Ultimately, my father got a job as a janitor at the post office, and this same man gave him a recommendation for the job. He would not bow.
Yes.
Because he felt he was morally right, and he took the hit.
Reverend Jackson, you're surrounded today by high school students. And high school is a time where it's pivotal in the creation of one's identity, especially right and wrong. And so when you think back to your own high school times, you attended a segregated school. And at the time, did that strike you as being wrong or just normal?
Well, it was normal and different, but we felt the white kids did not want to compete with us. We as opposed to having an inferiority complex, we figured something was wrong with them. Because we knew we could have beat them. We had rather gifted classmates in chemistry and physics and the like, and trigonometry and geometry that did not have adequate equipment. We knew our choir could have competed with them, that our football team could have competed with them, our teachers could have. And so, but they made the choice to lock us away. They were afraid to compete with us. But their facilities were superior. I mean, they had the practice field with the green grass and all of the amenities that went with that. So it was a sense that if we could just get the chance to compete, that we could show ourselves to be worthy. So that in high school, I played football. I think two things happened. One was after the first year, Mrs. Sales said to my mother, I want Jesse to take French. And so Mom said, I want you to take French. And she said, Mom, I can't. I made the football team, and I did well, and I'm on the honor roll. And so she said, and take French. I said, take French. So
do what your mama says.
Momocracy. So
momocracy, I love
momocracy. So yeah. I began to take it, and I was convinced by my classmates that, look, you're not going to have a French-speaking neighbor. If you speak the French to us, we don't understand what you're talking about. And so I start scheming. If I can make A's in English and history and a B or so in math and make a C in French following the curve, I still can play football, I can make the honor roll. And I schemed up a way to kind of get by. I remember Mrs. Sales sent me one day, she says, you can do better than you're doing. I said, I swear. She said, don't swear and don't lie. You could do better. And so I worked out my scheme. And I remember at graduation time coming across the stage, where she said, stop saying I don't know, at least say Johnny say Paul, and say something in French. I said, cafe, something. And she said, well, I've done my best. Her dream for me was greater than my dream was for myself. And I went to college, and at some point I had to take a foreign language, French, German, or Spanish. I had to take I took a French course. At least I could identify some subject and verb to conjugate. I remember Dr. Rice saying to me, you're not doing your best. It was like deja vu. I said, I'm doing my best. He said, you're not doing your best. Now, I remember coming across the stage at graduation saying, Doc, I got my diploma and I don't know French. I got by. And he said, well, keep on living. Same thing Mrs. Sales had said in high school. Lo and behold, I got a call one day from ambassadors at the UN. Can we come visit you because they're starving in the Sahel region of West Africa? And I said, of course, I'll be delighted. I will come meet you in New York or Washington. They said, we'll come to Chicago and visit you. And I could not, it was great anticipation. My neighbors, an African ambassador, coming to our residence. And they came. And I remember Amara Yusuf from Niger getting out of the car, the limousine. And I saw this big, broad English smile. He said, come on, parlez-vous, monsieur. I said, très bien, brother. He said, parlez-vous français? I said, no. And I was so embarrassed because I had done less than my best. And it caught up with me. I could have learned, and it didn't matter to me except because I had to go and visit Niger and these countries, I had to figure out how to at least find poisson, a little fish and poulet, a little chicken. I had done less than my best. And I felt a sense of guilt about that because I didn't do my best.
You got involved in a protest in your hometown community to desegregate a local library. Can you take us back to that moment?
What had happened was that the winter that came home from the University of Illinois, I had to do it. Somehow, as a freshman, ended up in a senior speech class, not appropriately counseled into the right classes. So I won the first level of this speech contest, the Houston Memorial Speech Contest. So that Christmas, I had to do a speech with 25 annotated bibliographies and write my own speech and then memorize it for the contest upon returning to school. So I got home, the first time I'd been home in 6 months, which was a real big deal, and I took the notes of Mrs. Smith, the colored librarian, and she said to me, I cannot help you because I don't have this number of books. But I have a friend at the Central Library. If you would give her your books you need, I'll send her a note and I'll call her. So I dashed all the way to the Central Library. And she was there alone except two policemen. No one else was in the library at that time. It was maybe 10:30 in the morning. She said, I'll get the books back to you in 6 days. I said, but it'll cut into my big Christmas vacation. I said, there's no one, just two of us here. I'll go down in the stacks and get the books. She said, 6 days. And so I didn't know why. And one of the police said, you heard what she said. I was naive. I got the message. She no doubt had called the police upon hearing I was coming to get the books. As I went to the back of the library and I cried, I was so hurt. I was hurt because I had to leave home for school 6 days earlier. I was hurt because I was humiliated, and because I was standing next to a statue of a soldier, and I thought about my father having been in the war. I was crushed in some sense. And in that summer, I said, when I come home, I will use this library. There were other classmates with a similar, same experience. So that July 1960, July 16th, we went to the public library. And I shall never forget, Reverend Hall gave us an orientation about how if they put cigarettes on you, don't fight back, be nonviolent, and be smart.
In the protests, if the police went up with cigarettes on you.
If they violate you, take the hit because it's about the cause bigger than yourself. And so we went there, and the police were alerted. And so if you don't leave, we will arrest you. We went back to church. So Reverend Hall, we were back. He said, why are you back so quickly? They were going to arrest us. I sent you there to get arrested. Go back. We went back and got arrested.
Well, were you afraid?
I didn't have enough sense to be afraid. It was just so much the right and the bravo thing, the challenge. Because after all, with Dr. King, 55, in Montgomery, the Little Rock, 9 in 57, the Greensboro group in February, we were kind of into a certain kind of groove to fight back. And so that was a very defining moment for me, because we took the sting out of jail. We put dignity where there had been disgrace in jail. We began to overrun that system by fighting back.
Reverend Jackson, you speak to young people around the world, and we have youth here who are very excited to ask you a question.
Reverend Jackson, you've met so many interesting people in your lifetime. If you could have a civil rights debate with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
Dr. King, it would not be a debate. Wow. I would be asking him questions, seeking his wisdom on what the options were. We see him as the I have a dream speech, kind of that piece of it, but at 14, his speech is on the Negro and the Constitution. At age 14, he finished high school at 15, and early entry. He finished college at 19. He finished seminary at 22. He finished his PhD at 26. His preparation was superior. So to be involved with him was a constant, perpetual learning experience. And so I would be engaged, if he were here tonight, in the conversation, asking him questions, no doubt about what has happened since he left us April 4th, 1968.
Dr. King has achieved such an iconic status now for our generation, but you knew him as a friend. So is there one memory that embodies the essence of who he was as a person?
It may be his often saying that vanity asked the question, is it popular? And we all have some need to be accepted, and tonight I was applauded and not booed. That's important, to be accepted. And then politics asks the question, will it work? Can it win? And we figure out how to do that, even if it means doing the ads that are disparaging of the competition. We do stuff to win. But conscience and morality asks, is it right? Dr. King, he got the Nobel Peace Prize and came back, East Room White House reception. said, President Johnson, thank you for the reception, but we need the right to vote. President Johnson's response was, Dr. King, you know, I know you were going to ask that question. I can't grant you the right to vote unilaterally. And I wish I could. The bad news is that Congress can, but they won't. And if we were to get the right to vote for blacks in the South, we would lose the South for another 30 years. Racists would become conservatives overnight. We would lose the whole South. And so Dr. King, in effect, was told by the president, but therefore you can't have the right to vote. Somewhere between Selma, Bloody Sunday, and Montgomery, we marched enough and bled enough, and innocent people died enough to touch the conscience of the nation and send up a global red flare that this was the hypocrisy of democracy.
Now, over the past 40 years, you must have been asked countless times to relive the memory from that fateful April day when you were in the parking lot underneath his balcony when he was killed. Does that moment still well up emotion in you?
It does. I try to avoid it. We were on the way to Reverend Billy Kyle's home for dinner. And we were coming across the parking lot, and a friend of mine from Chicago was with us, Ben Branch, who blew a saxophone, and he said, Jesse, you're coming across the parking lot, you don't have on a tie, we're going to dinner. I said, Doc, the prerequisite for eating is an appetite, not a necktie. He said, you're crazy, and we laughed. And then he was bending over talking with Ben, and I said, Doc, the bullet hit him there. And we knew it was, I could only hope it was shoulder and not neck. And I heard someone say, get low, because whoever it was, if there had been spring or semi-automatic, could have gotten a number of us at the same time. I remember running to the steps, and there he was, bleeding. I remember bending over him along with, I think Dr. Abernathy said, you know, get back, this is my friend. It was very chaotic at that moment. I got up and went and called Mrs. King, so I think Dr. King. It was a long 10 steps.
I can't imagine that call.
He had the blue T-shirt, and I said, he has been shot, I think, in the shoulder, but I think you should come as quick as you can. She was at home. I called their home phone, and I couldn't say what I saw. Yeah. And because the bullet hit here and severed his necktie, went down and blew out his innards. So within minutes, she had been called by AP or someone that he had been killed. So that whole period is, I still draw upon it with a great degree of pain and never quite discuss it. If anybody was ready to live or die for convictions, he was fearless in his courage. And I'm convinced that while he left us swiftly and did not suffer, he'd achieved his mission.
Absolutely. We hear about the water cannons, the attack dogs, the long freedom rides, the bus boycotts that went on for months. You and your generation made an enormous sacrifice to win those battles. Do you think that this generation could have risen to that same challenge?
It could and it can. Each generation must rise to the challenge of its day. I remember getting on the bus with my mother. I must have been about 8 years old. And I sat right behind the driver because I used to be with my father's wood truck. And I would sit up front with him, you know, like the big guys did. And there were 3 white kids sitting across in front of me, and they were having fun, very innocent fun. And the driver said, unless there's some order on this bus, it's not moving. He couldn't have been talking about me. I was alone. They were talking, but they were having fun. I said, the order on the bus. The adults on the back of the bus knew what he was talking about. I did not. There was a sign above the driver's head, the rear, colored seat from the rear, whites from the front. Those who violate will be punished by law. But so my mother came to get me. I said, I don't want to move. And she pinched me. And I was humiliated and I cried. What's happening here? And and one of my father's friends, Mr. Yates, said, don't worry. The back of the bus will get what the front will get. And if there's a wreck, those in the back won't get hurt. And don't sit next to them if they don't want to sit next to you. They were conditioning us to survive that situation. And so I was always maladjusted about the humiliation of that moment on that bus. And so we kept fighting, and so at a certain point, I can only say that we broke out.
Please, absolutely. You talk about the humiliation, the pushback that you received as a young person in that time, in the 1940s, South Carolina. But speeding ahead to 1971, you wrote the now legendary I Am Somebody poem and presented it on Sesame Street. And I find it fascinating because it says that we are all somebody. Can I ask you what inspired you to put that pen to paper?
Let me give you the context of it. We were in Resurrection City. After Dr. King was killed, we determined it was not so much who killed him, but what killed him, a sick society. Let the justice pursue the who. We would keep our mission going. And one morning I would go in the back of a truck each day and give out instructions what the protest would be that day. So on this morning it was raining. And it rained for many days and it was muddy. And almost all the men had deserted the camp, and most of the women and children. But Dr. King had been killed April 4th. Robert Kennedy killed June the 5th. Dr. King was dead, and we felt so alone and so abandoned, and the people that were giving up in their spirits. And they looked up to me to do something.
Absolutely.
Say something. I had no money to give them. I had no bus ticket for them to go back home, but I had read this book by Dr. Howard Thurman called Jesus and the Disinherited. He says in that book that when you're reduced to your irreducible essence and you stand naked against the world, you're still somebody. That you matter. Where there's life, there's hope, there's infinite possibility. And that book kind of came to me at that moment. So I said, I am. He responded, somebody. And say, I am somebody. Respect me. Protect me. Never neglect me. I may not have a skill, but I am somebody. Stop the violence. Save the children. Stop the war. Peace now. Keep hope alive. So it kind of came that way, you know.
Reverend Jesse Jackson. Now, those words that you wrote in 1971 will forever resonate, and we have a tribute to you. We asked young people around the world to share.
Wow.
I am somebody.
I'm somebody.
I am somebody.
I'm somebody.
I may be young.
I may be young.
But I am.
But I am somebody.
But I am somebody.
I may be poor.
But I am somebody.
I may be small.
Be small.
But I am somebody.
Somebody.
I may make a mistake.
But I am somebody.
My clothes are different.
My face is different.
My hair is different.
But I am somebody.
Somebody. I am black.
Brown.
White.
But I must be respected.
But I must be
Respected.
Protected.
never rejected.
I am the world's child.
I am the world's child.
I am somebody.
I am somebody. I am free.
I am the world's child.
I am the world's
I
child.
am somebody.
Somebody.
I am somebody. I am somebody.
I am somebody.
I am somebody.
I am.
I am.
I am somebody.
Wow. You know, last Friday, I celebrated my 69th birthday. That may be the biggest birthday present I've ever had. That's a big deal. But you know, akin to the I Am Somebody, which I did not write as a poem, didn't think of it in that way, it was really a response to a situation where people had given up hope, and I didn't want them to surrender or consider suicide, but self-affirmation. And I found all around the world, people have this longing sense of somebodyness, overcoming nagging senses of nobodyness. And so in the 8-day campaign, we went into New York in the lead, and we thought we could win New York with our low-budget, rich campaign. And we did not win New York. And many kind of gave up. We rode the train down to Philadelphia that night, I should never forget, and people trying to figure out how do you jump ship. I said, we must keep hope alive. You can do without the money, you cannot do without the hope, because you can have the money without the hope, you still lose. So keep hope alive was kind of a companion in later years to I Am Somebody. A healthy sense of somebodyness and hope can get you through a lot of dark tunnels.
Today, 40 years later, when you hear those words and when you say, I am somebody, who is Jesse Jackson?
Well, you know, it's been a long journey. And I thank God for allowing me to be a long distance runner. I am a servant whose work is not complete, and it unfolds every day. And every situation I'm in gives me a dimension of life today I did not see yesterday. And so what I do is I preach, and as one writer said, I preach every day, and I use words when I have to. Because visiting a jail is a sermon.
Absolutely.
Visiting a person who is making their death wish with cancer is a sermon. Going into the Congo, or going into South Africa, or going into a Native American reservation. And so I guess I can't separate myself from what I do. I am what I act out. I find in my work a sense of joy, so it's not a job, it's a mission. When I was running for the presidency, it was very difficult for me. The most difficult thing for me was saying, vote for me, give me your vote. Because I was programmed into doing the other, that, you know, you love yourself adequately and you love others properly. But the focus is never on me because it was not about me. So I'm always a bit disarmed by the me part of the question. I'm so caught up in the we. And I guess I find my me in the we. I basically live in the we.
Reverend Jackson, these young people are all incredibly excited, as I am, to be with you, but not every person could be in this room. And so when we invited the world to ask you questions, a young woman submitted one for you.
Hola, Señor Jackson. Me llamo Maria, and my question is, who are the second-class citizens of North America today?
Well, second-class citizens remain African Americans, and they are Latinos, and they are Native Americans, and they are poor people. There's a lot of people down there. And then there's, beyond these kind of ethnic categories, the wealth, the very wealthy are escalating, subsidized by the government, and the very poor are in some sense dismissed by the government. So there are 50 million Americans who are food insecure tonight. There are 42 million in poverty tonight. About 30 million or 28 million either unemployed or semi-unemployed or looking for a job who have given up tonight. And so they are the struggling people. That abandonment must end if we're to achieve greatness.
Reverend Jackson, after all the struggles, all the marches, all the protests, the world will never forget that iconic image of the tears welling in your eyes and the tears being shed when Barack Obama was elected president. What was running through your mind at that moment?
Well, the joy of the moment and the journey converged. The evolution from 48 to 08 was like a 60-year track meet. He ran the last lap of a 60-year race. All along that journey, there were people that you would never know. People like Mrs. Boynton, a seamstress, a guy named Cotton Reader, James Orange, who was threatened with being beaten or killed, which drove the protest in the first place. A guy named Sunshine, kind of nameless, faceless people all along that road had marched, had been martyred, and dismissed as the other than, and yet they made that night possible.
Absolutely.
The president ran the...
Absolutely.
And the people who made that night possible couldn't afford to come to Chicago for the party. They couldn't have been able to get the tickets. They couldn't have gone from Alabama, those who yet live, up to the big night that night. And so my mind went back to jail cells and the journey. But the joy of the moment, we won a huge victory.
Yes.
And in thinking about that, I think where the tears came from, I thought if Medgar could have just be just for 30 seconds, you know, fighting for the right to vote in Mississippi, and they shot him in the back in cold blood and killed him, and for 40 years they would not pursue the killers. If Dr. King could just be here just for 30 seconds, just to see the fruit of his labors. If those who had made that night possible could have come to their party. Yeah. So I thought about the joy and the journey, and that's where the tears came from. And I must say, I also thought about what is beyond us for this generation, beyond the expectation of that moment. In my mind was both the joy of the journey, and I guess in projecting, because I know this generation cannot stay in that moment. They must fight this day's battles. For while yesterday's journey, while we fought the back of the bus and the right to vote, this generation has a fight against a kind of terrorism that our behavior is funding. We fund the terrorists when we take the drugs. We fund them when we do not search for alternative energies, remain overdependent on oil. We fund them when we keep embracing larger military budgets on the one hand with people starving on the other. So every generation has its challenge. So Barack has won, President Barack has won, but you must pull the weight of your day. And through all of these challenges, no one has earned the right to do less than their best. When you do your best, great things will always come your way.
Final question for you. In your lifetime, you've seen the world go from Dr. King to President Obama. Now, we learn about the civil rights movement in modern history. We study your life in textbooks. Is there a final message that you would want to leave with these students?
It would be that President Barack Obama's election represents the midday of our politics. We also have the midnight of our economy, because banks were not overseen, and the greed was reckless, and they virtually sank the whole economy. We bailed out the banks, not linked to lending, not to reinvestment. So while they are rolling in bonuses, home foreclosures are still rising, and joblessness is still rising. And the insurance companies are doing quite well. But your generation must fight to end unnecessary wars. Your generation must fight to have a healthy environment in which we can breathe free. So we've globalized capital, but we must now globalize human rights and workers' rights and women's rights and globalize children's rights and environmental security. Why is it that we do so well at these huge athletic events, whether it's soccer, football, basketball, or baseball? Why can we, in those instances, choose uniform color over skin color? There's all the excitement and the anguish and the rage, and yet when the game is over, the winner wins with grace and the loser with dignity. What about that arena lends itself to us going to, if I am pulling for Green Bay and you are for the Bears, I'm pulling for the guy with my uniform color to beat your guy no matter what his race may be. If I'm pulling in the baseball game for Team A and you for Team B, we cannot choose teams based upon race. What allows us to rise above all this racial
Absolutely.
stuff? Because the conditions. Whenever the playing field is even, and the rules are public, and the goals are clear, and the referee is fair, we can all move to the next level. And I say to you, we did not know how good baseball could be until everybody could play. We don't know how good
Yes.
access to medical school, or engineering school, or law school, or professional service can be until all of us can play. So our mission really is an even playing field, something as old and ancient as equal opportunity and equal access. But through all of that, even with all of that, you still need your faith, because there are these uncertainties in life. You can do all the planning, but then comes the unexpected death, or the announcement that you have the cancer, or that you have the AIDS, that the airplane crashed. There are these unanticipated, unexpected dimensions of life, and it is not your facts that will get you through. Fate deals you a cruel hand. Only faith can fight fate. And that's where, in all of your doing, those of you who are privileged, use your privilege to find meaning in your privilege. But find your joy and help in those who don't have them, because you lift up those who are down and out. You find that they get lifted, but you also get elevated, and everybody wins.
Absolutely. Thank you to our shameless idealist, Reverend Jesse Jackson.